And Billy, don't you always do some international travel just to keep up with some of your players, right? Everybody's living all over the world.
Yeah, this summer it didn't work out that way. A couple of years ago, I went over to Montenegro to see Vooch, but he was playing with the Olympic team there, so there was a lot of training going on there. So didn't make a trip overseas to see any players. I saw Goran Dragic, that year as well, which was a great trip, but nothing overseas this season.
But did you get together with, I don't know, maybe Zach LaVine? Was that one of your trips?
Yeah, so like what ends up happening, for me at least, we had probably about 5 days of summer league practice, and then we ended up going to Vegas. And then after Vegas, I made a trip to L.A., spent some time with Zach, spent some time with Io, Kobe, Dalen, spent some time with Lonzo. They kind of all, relatively close to each other, so... we go out there and do that. And then, a bunch of guys came down to Miami to work out, went down to Miami and visited with them there. So, even though the trip wasn't necessarily overseas this summer, you're certainly going out at periods of time in the summer to visit with players and spend time with them.
And just that you were visiting with Zach, I think, is something that worth addressing now, because the pretty open dialogue last season about whether he would be coming back, what he decided to do with the surgery, all of the things. And now here we are on the brink of training camp, and Zach LaVine is coming back to Chicago, member of the Bulls. Could you just address how those conversations went in the off season, and the fact that he is back here now, how he fits into your plans this year?
Well, I mean, I've always enjoyed talking to Zach, and we've always had, a relationship that we've been able to communicate. And, like I said, anytime that, we've needed to sit down and talk, he's always been very open-minded about that. I think, when you're a player and you're going through an injury like he went through, and he's really disconnected, so to speak, from the organization, from the team, because he's doing his rehab. It was right after the All-Star break that he had surgery. Naturally you're going to want to know, okay, like, what direction are we going? How do I fit into this? All those kind of things. So it was really once July started, it was more like he was, back playing. He looks in really, really good shape. I think it's the first time, to be honest with you, in the last year or so that he's actually come back to training camp. If you remember, he came off knee surgery, so he looks a lot better. And then it's, more about how we're trying to play, how he fits in, those kind of things. And, I think the big thing is, hey, we've got a lot of younger players. Are we going to go young? Are we going to go, older? How's all this going to work? And we have open, honest conversations about it, and we talk about it.
Arturas, there was an expectation that maybe he would be moved. There was a perception that maybe he wasn't able to be moved or traded because there wasn't a market for Zach LaVine. How would you address that?
Well, I think last season was very difficult for him, for organization, for everyone. And but like Billy said, the last 2 years has been, injured. It's very frustrating for a player. And now he's finally fully healthy. He looks great. And we'll, looking forward to see him in a training camp.
Is he still open to be traded? Are you open to trading him? And does he need to sort of rehab his reputation around the league because of the reason you spoke of, because of injury, coupled with his contract, etc.?
Well, people forget that 2 years ago he was an all-star.
Yep.
So and he's an ultimate pro. He's a great guy, great person. He likes his teammates. So again, I'm looking forward to see him in a training camp. And we have a vision how we want to play. We've obviously spent this summer talking about it with Billy, and that we want to play more up tempo, and he fits into that, and we'll see how that works.
So much curiosity about what style of play you will be with the new players. There's a lot of changes going on now. You got Bazelis coming in as a draft pick, and you bring in Josh Giddey, who had a terrific Olympics, and you saw some of his capability. And you bring Zach, and you got Kobe White ready to take another step. How fun is it for you? This is almost like a lot of the same guys, but there feels like a reset to some degree because they're in different roles, or because DeMar DeRozan isn't here. Alex Caruso isn't here. Guys who maybe had played into those roles so well for so long, now it feels new.
Yeah, Arturas and I, speak all the time, but even, coming out of last season, and having to overcome, the loss of players, so to speak, with Patrick Williams' situation, Zach's situation, Torrey Craig. There was just a lot of things that ended up happening. I think everybody knows the way Alex Caruso plays. He's so reckless. A lot of times his availability, was up in the air. So, I think, last year I was pretty honest from the standpoint that, we were not a team that was built to play really fast. We just weren't built that way. And I think, as a coach, you always want to try to play to your players' strengths. And obviously, the job that DeMar did for the time that he was here was remarkable. And he was great closing out games and a total pro. And he was great with the younger players. I think as some of the roster has changed, there is a mix of younger players and there's a mix of some older players and how well we can gel and mesh together. I think the other part is going through the experience in Oklahoma City when we had Chris Paul, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and Dennis Schroeder. We played all those three guards together, and I think when you look at our backcourt situation, we have some talented backcourt players, but they're only effective if the ball's in their hands, right? So what kind of sacrifices can we make individually, where we're not going to have one guy with the ball in his hands all the time. We're going to have to be able to sacrifice and try to play to each other's strengths. I think the other part of that now is I think the way the team is constructed, with the mix of some older guys and some younger guys, we have to play faster. I think one of the things we battled the last couple of years is, in some ways, and Arturas and I have talked about this, we've lost the analytical battle. We just were not a high-volume three-point shooting team, and there was games we walked into where you've got teams that are taking an enormous amount of three-point shots, and we're not able to even keep up with that rate. And it's not so much about necessarily just bombing up three-point shots, but you don't want to be up against it on a continual basis, because you're just not generating enough of them. Because listen, everybody, when you say DeMar DeRozan, they always say this mid-range killer, and he's unbelievable. It's the reason why he's going to be a Hall of Fame player, is because that's what he does do. And you don't want to sit there and try to make a player be somebody he's not. So I do think that the tempo that Arturas and I have talked about, over the summer, we've got to play that way. And we have, you go back and hopefully he'll be able to get on the court. Lonzo, he's moving in that direction, but he was really a guy that enabled us to play faster, moving the ball up the floor. I think the same thing can be said for Josh Giddey. He's a guy that can really, really push the tempo, and he does it a lot with the advanced pass. And I think for those two guys, players love playing with them because they know if they run, they're going to find him.
And it's difficult, obviously, to play offense constantly against the set defense, and when you pushing the ball, that's when you generate rim shots and open threes, and that's what we could try to get as many of those as possible. After misses or after makes.
Lonzo hasn't played in so long, so I just don't even know what that would look like. I'm sure you've got a good plan in place. There would seemingly have to be some kind of minutes limit or some sort of, maybe natural days off within a comeback like that. It's been 2.5 years, basically.
He's been, we've been talking to, obviously to Zoe. He's excited about the training camp. But again, during the training camp, we're going to try to find out, that the loads that he's going to have to take in training camp and the grind on a daily basis will depend his, rotational minutes, his role and how much he's going to play. But he's been playing 5-on-5 since August, and he's been doing more. He had recently setback just because he got sick and then missed like a week and a half. But by training camp, he should be ramping up.
Do you envision him as a bench player? Do you envision him as a starter and controlled minutes? Because he's a guy who obviously, when healthy, and it's always dangerous to say when healthy because it has been so long. But do you think, or is this to be determined?
Well, I think the thing that Arturas mentioned, which is critical, we don't know how he's going to respond after games, after practice, because we haven't seen it, right? So that's where we first got to start off with, is where, is it something where he plays 15 to 20 minutes and now he's got to take the next day off? Can he play 25 or 30 minutes? How does he respond? The back-to-backs. We don't know. We don't know any of those things, so we're going to wait to find out. Now, I do think the one thing I look at it from this lens is Lonzo loves to play. He loves to play. And at his age, as much as he loves to play, he wants to play beyond this year. So we, I think, also have a responsibility to make sure that he's in a position, where he can play after this season, where it's not one of these things where, it's not managed correctly, or we're not putting him in a situation to be effective. Could that be 15 to 18 minutes a game? Maybe. Could it be 20 to 25? Maybe. There's just a lot of things. If you look at him as a basketball player, he's an elite point guard that certainly, warrants being out on the court a lot. But is he capable of doing that physically? And those are things we just don't know right now. And until we get to training camp and he's out there, we'll have a better feel of how we can maybe manage him and allow him to be a productive player.
You know, it feels, maybe it's not true, that you're working at cross purpose, that you're trying to do player development, you're trying to get young guys incorporated, and you have a lot of players that are back. Does that signify that you are going to be starting certain guys and then extending minutes through more guys than usual? Usually you'd like to go about 9 deep. You don't go much more than that, but does this mean you have to go 10 deep?
Well, I think one of the things that when people look at the development piece of a player, they only look at it through the lens of playing time. And They think, okay, the only way to develop a player is just throw him on the court, play him 35 minutes, let him make mistakes, and figure it out from there. You've got to be able to, I think, help a young player in particular understand the things that really go into winning and the things that go into being a successful player. Is playing time part of that? Sure. Adversity is also a huge part of that. How are they going to respond to tough games? You know, being exposed, not having the experience. I think for a young player, developing a routine, you know, what do they do? How do they recover? You know, and this idea of, hey, listen, we're just going to take a bunch of young players, throw them out there, and then, you know what, just give them playing time. I think there's also things that development, you got to earn things too, you know, and I think our mentality and focus is we're going into every game trying to win. So when you look at a guy like Montes, yes, part of his development is being on the court, no question. But he also needs to develop a routine. He also needs to understand the league. He needs to understand who he's playing against. There may be a situation that Arturas and I sit down and maybe with the amount of minutes he's getting is, hey, listen, he needs to go down to the G League and get more minutes. Like the development part is it's such a bigger process than just, hey, go on the court, work on his shooting and ball handling, because the biggest thing that a young player has to deal with that's coming from where he's coming from, or any young player coming from, you know, is the fact that there's a level of inexperience, there's a strength issue, there's a lot of things guys have to develop. So the development piece is critical, but also what are the things that really go into winning? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to compete and win, and you want to help a player develop winning habits.
And as you're saying that, people are nodding their heads and agreeing with you because it all makes a lot of sense. And then the Bulls fans are thinking about, okay, where is Patrick Williams in that development? Because Patrick Williams went through a lot of the things that you just described, and he had to learn how to be a professional. He's 23 years old. This is his 5th season. But people talk about him like he's been in the league for 10 years. And yet his development, I think, he seems like, from the outside looking in, ready to take a step. Also needs to take a step to justify his draft status and what he means to this team.
Well, also, you know, let's not forget that he almost missed 2 seasons out of 4.
Right.
You know, so he missed, you know, his second, and he had an injury last year. So, you know, he obviously worked extremely hard, you know, this summer to get back, and you know, we ramping him up right now, you know, for training camp. So it's going to be a important season for him. But you know, when we are talking about us being younger, you know, you also look at, you know, Kobe. This is his 6th year. You know, Patrick is 5th. Ayo is 4th. Josh Giddey is 4th. You know, so we young, but at the same time, you know, there's a lot of experience there. So, you know, again,
how far has Patrick come since you have been coaching him?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting what Arturas said, because I really felt when I first got here, I thought one of the most difficult things for 3 players in particular that they were not equipped and ready to handle was when Wendell Carter, you know, was maybe in his 2nd year. Kobe was going into his 2nd year. It was coming off of COVID, and then Lauri Markkanen. And it was like, okay, these guys are going to be the leaders in the future. They didn't have enough experience for that. But I think, like Arturas said, with Ayo, with Kobe, with Patrick, these guys now have got legitimate years of NBA experience under their belt. And I do think, from what Arturas said, some of the injuries has probably stunted that a little bit. But I do think Kobe's a way different leader than he was when I first got here, just through the experience. Same thing with Ayo. I think the same thing could be said for Patrick. You know, I think he's starting to understand a little bit more. But when you're talking about a player coming in as maybe the youngest player in the NBA, just to throw a guy out there. Now, some of it worked out roster-wise that he was given the opportunity to play quite a bit, right? But I do think he mentally has taken some growth and some development there on his part, that he's in a much, much better place in terms of understanding who he is as a player.
Did you spend any time watching the Olympics? Do you like Olympic basketball? Did you like seeing the U.S. team? Did you like having some guys that were involved in the Olympics? Do you think that's a good experience for players?
I mean, I'm always nostalgic about Olympics. I love Olympics. That's my favorite event, and obviously go back to 92, 96. I had an opportunity to play for Lithuanian national team, but I mean this Olympics. I watched every sport. It was available. It was great. Televised, streamed. Each sport, and it was just loved the opening, the ceremony. Obviously, again, going back to when they used to just walk around the stadium and opening ceremonies. It's just a special event that unites all world. Just for a sports event.
At one point, did you scout for Team USA for Mike Krzyzewski?
I did for the World Cup 2014. Not Olympics, but yeah, for a couple of years I worked with the USA Basketball kind of while I was in Denver to help them out a little bit with scouting. Yep, yes I did.
That was kind of fun to see the U.S. win that thing. It was worrisome, though, because it was closer than I thought it would be, and especially France could be a dangerous team moving forward. What the heck was that?
Well, the evolution, as of basketball and how the world caught up to U.S. and seeing 37, I think, NBA players play in Olympics. It was really good competition and close games, and it was great to watch.
Let's talk about the Eastern Conference. Parity is everywhere in the Eastern Conference, and as much as we can talk about what you guys do well and what you need to work on, how much of that parity gives you hope this season, because you can be a team that you stick around depending on what your goals are, but there's a lot more parity, it seems like, than ever.
That gives you a chance, right? But for us, it's like you got to start from training camp trying to figure it out, with this new group, guys coming back from injuries, new faces, and how that all is going to work, because a lot of players that going to have certain responsibilities and roles, they've never had them before. So it's going to be good to see in training camp, and we're going to have to take, one game at a time in terms of expectations and see where we're at.
Billy, you like the Eastern Conference? Do you worry that that this particular group of teams, Boston seems to sit alone atop those standings and obviously won the title. But the conference itself, the division, doesn't look overwhelming.
Yeah, the way I always look at it, the schedule comes out. You're playing 82 games, right? And the schedule is what it is. And to me, the one thing is that every night is a challenge. Does it make a difference who you're playing against? If you don't come ready. These guys are professional athletes as well. So I think our focus, as Arturas mentioned, has got to be on ourselves. What are the things that we have to do? And certainly, Philadelphia getting Paul George, and about Milwaukee, with another year of that group under their belt. You talked about Boston. And then I think there's probably a lot of teams trying to find, like we are, an identity and how they're going to play and how guys are going to gel and mesh together. And, for us, I think we just need to worry about us and what we've got to do and how we need to play and the things we've got to commit to on a daily basis.
Organizationally, how will you handle the rhetoric surrounding the team? Because if you are as good as you want to be, then maybe you jeopardize that protected top 10 or that pick that you have. And there's how pro sports works. You know how it works in a sports city like Chicago. So what is the approach, and how will you answer those questions?
Well, the approach, again, going into training camp, and then depends how the things work out in training camp. Now we're going to approach every game, and we're going to try to win every game. And because, going back to, development is like what goes into winning. And that's the only way you can teach those guys, how to win games is, going through that. And with a lot of things to be determined, I think training camp will show a lot of things.
All right, we got a special guest, believe it or not. Now joining us on the Arturo Tire Hotline, Arturo, your hometown tire, Arturo.com, is none other than Joakim Noah, famous Bulls player, near MVP with the Bulls, but certainly a championship winner with Billy in Florida. Joakim, welcome to the show.
What's going on, guys? What's going on?
Wow. Thanks for joining us. Wow, what are you up to these days?
Well, I just wanted to give some love to my old ball coach, and I had a few questions for him. I'm calling from the deep jungles of Africa, hunting lions out here, and just taking the time to call into the radio show and see if Coach was going to have the 5 men at the top of the press and just play some real run and gun, Billy the Kid style basketball.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have someone with his athleticism. We used to put him on the ball at Florida in front of the press, and he was a nightmare. But he is one of my favorite guys I've ever coached, and just an incredible teammate, great human being. And, it's been great to be in Chicago where he certainly did so much, and then he comes back through with his foundation and stuff. So you never know where he's at. It could be Hawaii. It could be Africa. You never know. You never know where he could be at.
Where are you, Joakim?
I have a quick question. So when you get when the big man gets a defensive rebound, are you going to bring him? Are you going to let him bring the ball up the court? Or tell me a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting with him and Horford. When I had both those two guys, it was a little bit unique. I let those guys rebound and bring it on the break, which is always a little bit different because in college they would always send the guards back for floor balance. So these guys were always coming down the floor racing it, but. Joakim, I don't know if we've got anybody like that on our team. We'll probably be outletting to the point guards this year.
Okay, that's a good thing. That's a good thing. Just wanted to let you know I was just hanging out with your boy Numbnuts, a.k.a. Torian Green.
Good.
And
keeping him in line, I hope.
He was still really mad about that, the fact that you didn't let him come back to the ball as a point guard.
Listen, with you and Al, the way you guys handled the ball, we needed to get him up the floor. He fails to realize that on that Florida team, no one knows this, he took more shots than you, Brewer, and Al. Can you believe that? He took more shots than all three of you guys. You guys roll lottery picks, and we got this guy's taking all the shots.
I hope he hears this.
Yes.
So Coach, what are you most excited about with this year?
Just the start of the season, for one. I think, too, how we can try to play, with our current personnel. I think we've got some backcourt players that, can really help us force tempo and force pace. I think we can play a lot faster. I'm looking forward to that. I think we got a really good group of guys that will work. We had most of our guys, Joakim, in Miami because during the Democratic Convention, our place was shut down. Mostly all the guys were in Miami for a week, and then we've had a lot of guys come back right after Labor Day to work out. So I think it's a good working group. I think that they know there's going to be some challenges and some sacrifices that we've got to make, but as a whole, in terms of the people that we have, I feel really good about them.
Any more questions, Joakim?
No, I'm just really looking forward to coming and see you guys during the year. I always cherish the time, spending some time with Coach Donovan and talking after the games and talking basketball and talking strategy. That's always one of my favorite things to do in the year. So I know the expectations are not high, but I know that you're going to come in right now and just make us proud, Coach.
I appreciate you. I love you.
I love you too, man.
Great stuff, Joakim. Thank you, buddy. Thank you for a great career with the Bulls, too. Man, I'll never forget that year. When he was,
great Bull team ambassador. Billy, though, when you look back to that Florida team, which would have been higher? If that NIL existed, which would have been higher, the payroll for that team or the first NBA team you coached?
Well, people don't realize this. So when those guys won the national championship, they were all lottery picks. And Joakim, after his sophomore year, was projected as the first player taken in the draft. And everybody says to me, what did you do from a sales standpoint to get all these guys to come back? How'd you get them to come back? And the reality was, the only guy in that class that could not go pro and was not going to get drafted was Torian Green. And Joakim and Corey Brewer and Al Horford, they all made a pact that they were not going to leave him out to dry in his career. So when people ask me, why did those teams win? That's what goes into winning. That, you talk about sacrificing, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that in order to win, but it speaks to their character in terms of, if we leave, this guy's going to be left with a team that's not going to be very good, and what's going to happen to his career? You know, they used to give him a hard time all the time when he wasn't working hard. Like, you got one more year and that's it. We're out of here. You know, but then they came back and did it again. But that was the reason why they came back. And you think about in Joakim, the character of bypassing being the #1 pick and going back for your teammate.
Worked out well in the draft for him and the Bulls.
No, it was a perfect situation for him here, and he was great. And I knew he'd be great wherever he went, but just the integrity and the character of competition and winning and being a teammate is incredible.
Did you help him pick out that suit he wore on draft night?
I couldn't even tell you half the outfits he had while he was on campus. You know.
Hey, gentlemen, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Billy. AK, really appreciate your time.